Japan, in my opinion, and in opinion of most scholars, is the nation who talked most about the honor but showed the least. It was incredible that they wanted to honor the Japan. They wanted to fight until the last man for honor and stuff, and they didn't show any honor. And then they have the audacity to condemn the bombings as some horrific US deed.
Hi there, my name is Andrew. I I used to study politics in university, but international politics in university. But now I'm a software developer, so really confusing career move I got right there. But outside of that, my spare times I enjoy reading a lot about history, Japanese history, especially during the Sengoku period in the Meiji period is which fascinated me as well. Another period is the post opium war China in up until communists, which is today. That's a period that I kind of spent a lot of time studying as well during my spare time in doing university. So and today I'll be arguing that the atomic bombs were not justified.
Hi everyone, my name is Martin and I'm from Serbia. I am a law student here at the University of Novi Sad and also a president at our debate club here at the university. And I am a person who takes interest in various topics, and such as this one as the atomic bombings. I will be arguing and I'll be debating here actually that I think that the atomic bombings on Imperial Japan were justified. So when talking about the justification of the atomic bombings, I think that we should, just preface the situation, and I will give you my main argument, and then I will just devolve into fewer arguments. But the main argument is that ending the war quickly was the most important thing at that time. And all the actions and all the operations that would come afterward, if the bombs were not dropped, I think it would just be a worse outcome than it was with the atomic bombing. So ending the war quickly would be my first argument, followed by the nature of a total war as an answer to all the maybe arguments of the suffering that it's, of course, delayed after the bombing, and also the suffering that the population of Japan endured after the bombing. It was just the nature of a total war. So I will devolve more into that. The costly operation downfall that was gonna come is also an argument that I can devolve into once we start talking about it, because that was something that would actually come to if the bombs were not dropped. And we can, of course, converse about that later. Then the diplomatic pressure of the Soviet Union, and the bombs were just, a way to show that even after the war, the US and the United States are the power, the military power, and they will not hold back if something like this ever happened. It was a means to end the war totally, the World War, so we do not have World War III. And the lack of alternatives is something that I tie again to the nature of total war, and it was just necessary to do. And the last argument, when we will, of course, discuss everything and, of course, hear your side, Andrew, would be that we are here discussing either a moral or a pragmatic question.
The topic fix. Okay, so I'll quickly summarize my position. I will argue that the bombs was not justified because I think people mistaken that the bomb themselves did not end the Second World War. The Japanese Supreme War Councils was discussing about surrender way before the atomic bomb was being dropped. Back in June, in end of May, in the beginning of June, there was a lot of discussion about surrendering already. As a matter of fact, back on May, there was a surrender draft submitted to Truman saying that the Japanese sides are willing to surrender as long as the emperors are still there. This is kind of the main reason, kind of the chokehold which stop Japanese from surrendering, as in they really want to keep their empire. And either the pro-war, the pro-continuing the war side, and the seek a peace side within the councils kind of agreed on that. And Truman himself is fully aware of that. If he could have just signaled to the Japanese side that they're willing to keep the emperor, which post-war wise they did very much keep the emperor anyway, then the war could have ended a lot quicker without dropping the atomic bombs. Um, Also, in terms of total invasion, I think even if there's a total invasion, the casualties will be relatively low. During the post-war period, there is really long justifications on there was overestimations of like how much people will die during the war, in order to justify the bomb. But the real figure is the best estimated is there will be around 20,000 casualties if there's a total invasion, whereas the figures being announced were like 200,000 after the war, which is again exaggerated to justify the atomic bomb. For me, from what I can tell, the main reason, the main justification that the Americans really want to use the bomb is they could not use it on Germany. They spent £2 billion on the Manhattan Project, and originally it was going to drop in Nazis territory, but obviously they surrendered before they got a chance to. So they're desperately seeking for a way to justify this $2 billion spend, and Japan become like more or less the guinea pig. And in this case, even if I am to accept the Hiroshima bombing, sorry, but even if we are to if I'm to accept your argument saying that atomic bombs were justified to end the war quickly, I believe it only justified the first one. The second bomb itself is for my view completely unnecessary. Nagasaki is a territory which have no military purpose. It's really remote from Kyoto, and by the time the bomb was dropped, the Japanese sides were already talking about surrendering. And yes, I think that would be it for me for my side.
All right, thank you, Andrew. These are some great points, but I think that I should introduce to I should introduce you to some things that may not have been clear here. So you have been saying that the Japan was talking about surrender, and they also sent a draft to Truman and stuff. And the main thing here was they wanted to preserve an emperor, but with this the viewers need to understand that in Japan, and you also know this probably, there was a shogun, right? That was these military families that ruled the Japan for like 600 years, and they made all the calls. So when they got an emperor, and the people were used that the military persons were actually the ones who were controlling the emperor, and this was just a widespread commonality between the people of Japan, and the emperor himself was very pressured by these militarist leaders there to actually not surrender. So whether they were sending a draft or not, this was very concealed from all the public and also the officials at the White House, because what they did is they tried to make a surrender. Okay, that was one information, but there was also an information they're trying to basically defend the country until the last person standing. They were recruiting women, children, men who were disabled, everybody. So there was this discourse, and it was not sure if they're going to surrender or not. And then preserving the emperor just means that they can also revive this militaristic power after they maybe surrender. So the emperor at that moment, so disregarding the fact that they have then allowed the people of Japan to elect emperor as an just a ceremonial figure, here he wasn't that. He was, one side believes he was a puppet to these militarist leaders, and the other side actually believes that he was the militarist leader himself. So we didn't, and they didn't. I mean, the US didn't have a clear answer. It was not clear they were going to surrender. And this was especially exaggerated by the time the first bomb dropped. The first surrender talks were being held, right? And it was the same situation. Half of the ministries, there was three ministries and three other ministries. So it was three ministries for military, and the three were non-military. They had both like contradictory beliefs. They the first three ministries that were military wanted to fight until the last person, and surrender wasn't an option, or it was so conditional that it could not be accepted. And the three ministries who were more modern, they were saying no, we should surrender. So again, we didn't have a clear information. We don't know what they are going to do. And if you have a situation like that, you always anticipate that it's going to be the worst option, because the militarist ministries and the military leaders at that time, and this shogun that it's called, it's not the real shogun from the past centuries, but it is the materialization of the shogun there. So what happened is they were counting that they would use force against these, of course, ministries who were for the surrender, and they would not surrender. So the first bomb that was dropped, okay, fine. It was on the military facilities, and the city of Hiroshima was also a military facilitated city. But Nagasaki was industrialized, and they were actually moving the military equipment, and they had the Mitsubishi factory there, so they were also producing military stuff there. And with nuclear bomb, you cannot choose to bomb one block and the other is left out. I don't deny the atrocities of the nuclear bomb, but it was by far the lesser evil than what would come afterwards, because Japanese were not going to surrender. Doesn't matter, maybe the emperor himself believed in surrender, doesn't matter. It's what the people believe, and what the military ministries believe, because they would then do the guerrilla warfare or whatever. We don't know that. We just know that if US troops went into the land invasion, which was planned, if this wouldn't work, the Operation Downfall, we would look at estimated 2 million casualties, and from both sides even more, so maybe 3-4 million from both sides, because this is, the Japanese have the opportunity to actually lure them into their territory, and Japanese were using these techniques that were unknown to US soldiers. It would have been a bloodshed of unimaginable amounts. So I just think that with this surrendering option, and with whether it was clear or not, I stand for the point that it was not clear, and that the US had to intervene. And one more second, for the 2 billion investment that you said they had to justify it. Well, they could have just thrown it into some island, on the coast.
I'm sorry. I just kind of want to talk a bit first. First of all, I think you talk about the 2 billion thrown into Ireland. Imagine that. How popular would that make Truman be? I think I read a lot about how Truman think of the atomic bomb. Him himself do not justify using it on civilian target. I think you mentioned a bit like Hiroshima and Nagasaki as military target, but as a fact, they only have really small manufacturers going on. It's like saying that Sunderland is a military target because they produce cow over there. I mean, it could be technically, but by this point, it matters very little. In terms of the shogunate, you kind of mentioned, yes, the Tokugawa family have ruled Japan for over hundreds of years, using the emperor as a puppet. But this kind of changed a long time ago. Well, 100 years ago, before the war started, doing what they call the Kaisei Hokan, where the power returned to the emperor, and a shogun and shogunate in general have rapidly declined in power. So I'll say to say that the emperor himself is kind of completely don't have control, and just kind of act as a complete puppet. I don't think that is correct. As a matter of fact, you mentioned a bit about this the council, where there's 3 military members who are want to continue the war, and the other 3 who are more moderate. Yes, the military side is led by a general called Amani, and the moderate side is led by the Prime Minister Suzuki. As a matter of fact, in 8th of sorry, I just try to get the date right in here. In the 8th of August, when there were discussion after the first atomic bomb being dropped into Hiroshima, the discussion is still in the dead end. I think it is worth noting that the military side might not be as completely mad as you think. Privately, between Amanid and Jogo, another consular within the another member in the council, in private conversation, he understand that Japan could not win the war, but they were willing to fight to the very end and very dead to protect the Goktai, as in the system of Japan, and to protect and to protect the emperor. As they see from the way they see it, if the emperor die, it symbolizes the downfall of the Daiho of the Japanese race. Even himself never think that surrender is off the table, and at the end of the day, the that law you mentioned that the emperor was like kind of like a puppet. At the end of the day, the surrender that law was broken by the emperor himself. Suzuki himself dragged the emperor into the conversation when the emperor himself had been really want to seek for a proper surrender since June, just like Suzuki himself. But his position is a bit awkward. His position is a bit like the Queen Elizabeth or King now, King Charles. Yes, sorry. Take some time for me to remember it. King Charles. He's the technical head of the state, but should not involve in politics that much. But even in a situation like that, himself eventually get his hand dirty and step in and accept the surrender, and basically overthrow the vote of the militants. So I'll say to say the emperor is like a complete puppet in this case is not accurate.
Or let me respond to that, is that I was saying that he was more of a puppet because that exactly what you said. He's like a ceremonial figure there, and because he actually announced the surrender afterwards, he was there was a coup. Just before that, it was a very hard decision for an emperor to go and stand up there and surrender Japan officially. So even there at the end, so after the bombs, after everything happened, it was even then hard to make such an announcement. So what does this tell us? That the general thinking of people was more influenced by these militant ministries, and also the shogun idea, that, oh, the emperor is now only going to listen to that because we had this for 600 years. And I'm just saying that I'm introducing the idea that people were actually not believing the emperor whatsoever in these end times. After the first bomb, they already know what was happening, you said. Okay, but then why didn't they just unconditionally surrender? They still wanted to fight. And this is the thing. Japan, in my opinion, and in opinion of most scholars, so it aligns, is the nation who talked most about the honor but showed the least. The atrocities they have committed and the war crimes they have committed, for they were actually tribunaled for, it was incredible that they wanted to honor the Japan. They wanted to fight until the last man for honor and stuff, and they didn't show any honor. And then they have the audacity to condemn the bombings as some horrific US deed, the genocidal deed, and then dismantle them as part of the war crimes as well. I'm not saying it wasn't a genocide. It was all very horrific. It's war. Of course, that happens. We're not debating that. It's just you cannot turn a blind eye to one side and then only just condemn the other side, is what I wanted to say. So I think that emperor as a ceremonial figure was the reason that this surrender was not happening. If he had the word, I think from the first get-go, I think that surrender would come much clear and much more earlier than it was.
Oh, is that yes? I would say I'll somewhat agree on some of the points you make there. Again, personally, I do not agree on the point where you say you insist that the emperor is puppet when he himself was the last one to make the surrender decisions. I do agree, like and about the coup you mentioned. I think you over exaggerate what the coup kind of expressed. It was led by again the general himself trying to overthrow the emperor, trying to take the emperor hostage to stop the surrender. But at the end of the day, it was done by a really small group of militants, and I fail to see how this is a good representation of the general vibe or the public mood toward the war. I think in general, the Japanese people do not want to continue the war, and I kind of see the point you mentioned about the Japanese hypocrisy. No doubt they do a lot of horrific things during the Second World War, especially during the 731 unit and the Nanjing massacre, which, if you can imagine, I've been taught of that a lot. But I do what I'm here not to justify is the atomic bomb itself. I do not see that how salting the land and using such a mass destruction weapon could be justified just because your opponent do horrible deed as well. If we all continue this kind of line of thinking, then well, we're just going to end up into a cycle where we just keep doing more and more extreme and horrible things to each other. And I just want the audience to think about it. Is that kind of the world we want to live in? If people do this to me, I can return the favor in 10 times, drop a nuke, drop a hydrogen bomb, whatsoever.
Even then, the US, the Soviet Union, already invaded, and that's another question. I didn't want to start here, but you kind of made me to do it. We didn't have a choice. The Western world didn't have a choice, because the Soviet Union would then start the land conflict, and we couldn't stop the Operation Downfall. This was the only choice, and it was the fastest way to end the war.
So the last point Martin make is about Soviet Union, which I am afraid I don't really have enough time to cover at this point. But just really quickly, the bomb was dropped on the 6th, and the Soviet invasion started at 8th. So to saying that the bomb was necessary to deter Soviet, I do not think that is entirely accurate. But again, I can't address this point. I just want to quickly summarize my positions. When I read through a lot of the literature and history about both the Japanese side and the USA side, I believe it is a really difficult decision. I think Martin learned a bit of that, but during the Fourth War, it's really hard to tell people the situation. But I still stand by the fact that even if we can justify the Hiroshima bombing, the Nagasaki one was completely unnecessary.